cold Los Angeles night, as a light drizzle fell, neon lights from a gas station flickered across the wet pavement. The city never truly slept, but in this quiet moment, the hum of engines and the occasional splash of passing cars set the scene. Among them, Keanu Reeves, known for his humility off-screen, pulled up on his black motorcycle. Clad in a leather jacket, rain droplets clung to his helmet as he removed it, revealing slightly tousled hair damp from the mist. He was just another traveler stopping to refuel, until something caught his eye. A young, visibly exhausted woman moved swiftly between cars, carrying heavy boxes, wiping windshields, and assisting customers. Despite her fatigue, she maintained a polite smile, though it was clear this night was taking its toll on her. 7 months pregnant, every step seemed weighed down by more than just physical strain. Nearby, a small girl sat on a plastic chair under the station's awning. Her tiny fingers clutched a worn red pencil as she sketched in an old activity book, her brows furrowed in deep concentration. Beside her, only 2 other stubby pencils, blue and yellow, hinted at how much she cherished these simple tools. Curious, Keanu stepped closer, glancing at her drawing. A kitchen scene, pots steaming, a table at the center, and an unfinished counter with a blank sign. "Do you like to draw?" he asked gently. The girl looked up, surprised, then nodded shyly. "I draw places I want to go." Keanu smiled. "And this place? What is it?" She hesitated, gripping her red pencil tightly, as if deciding whether to share her secret. Before she could answer, her mother appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. "Sophia, don't bother the gentleman," she said with a tired but polite smile. "She's not bothering me," Keanu replied warmly. "In fact, I was just learning about her art and the places she dreams of." Emily steadied him for a moment, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution, but before she could respond, a car horn blared from another pump. "Excuse me," she said, immediately returning to work. Keanu lingered, watching as she moved between tasks, her pace slower now, her hand occasionally pressing against her back as if trying to relieve the strain. He glanced back at Sophia's drawing, something about it pulling him in. It wasn't just a simple sketch, there was a dream hidden in those pencil strokes. As the night stretched on, Emily finished her final task, but her movements had grown sluggish. The exhaustion of working late shifts while pregnant was evident. As the last customer pulled away, she leaned against the pump for support, closing her eyes for just a moment, trying to push back the wave of fatigue. From a distance, Keanu watched. He saw more than just a woman working a tough job. He saw a mother carrying a weight heavier than anyone should bear alone. What he did next left everyone at that gas station in shock, and changed Emily's life in a way she never expected. You won't believe the impact of his gesture. Before we dive into what happened next, tell us where you're watching from. And if you love heartwarming stories like this, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow, we have another special one just for you. Beside her daughter, Emily hesitated, her exhaustion evident. Keanu, noticing the weight of her silence, finally stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said gently, careful not to startle her. "Do you need help with something? You seem tired." Emily looked at him, momentarily caught off guard. Her instinct was to refuse. "Thank you, but I'm fine. Just a little back pain, it's normal during pregnancy." Keanu's expression softened. "Normal shouldn't mean constant," he replied, his voice filled with genuine concern. There was something about the way he said it that made Emily pause. She shook her head and glanced down at the pavement. "There's not much to be done. It's just part of life." Keanu didn't push further, but he saw how she shifted, subtly supporting her lower back as she sat. He crouched slightly, maintaining a respectful distance. "Do you do this every night?" Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon rather than him. "2 nights a week here. In the mornings, I clean offices. It's what pays the rent and keeps Sophia in school." Keanu was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. "And when do you rest?" he asked softly. Emily let out a small laugh, one devoid of humor. "Rest? I don't really have time for that." Bills don't wait. And with the baby coming, I need to work even more. There's no choice. Keanu's voice dropped to almost a whisper. It shouldn't have to be this way. For the first time, Emily looked directly at him. Her eyes, filled with exhaustion, met his. But it is. At least for me. I made choices that brought me here. I can't complain. Complaining doesn't help Sophia. Quietly, Sophia reached out, placing her small hand over her mother's. You do everything for me, Mama. Emily's expression softened, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Because you're all that matters, sophomore. You're the reason I keep going. Keanu watched the exchange, a deep empathy settling in his chest. He saw the weight Emily carried, her pregnancy, her relentless work, but most of all, the emotional burden of providing for her daughter despite impossible circumstances. Emily's voice wavered as she continued. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm doing enough. If one day she'll look back and think I just fought, but never really lived. That I never gave her something beautiful. Sophia squeezed her mother's hand tighter. You give me everything, Mama. Emily smiled, but a shadow passed over her face. There was something unspoken, something heavier. Keanu hesitated before asking, what about her father? Emily froze for just a moment. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. He left when he found out I was pregnant again. A knot tightened in Keanu's chest. He said he didn't want another responsibility. That it was already hard enough with one child. She paused, swallowing hard. So, he packed his things and left. Sophia listened silently, her eyes filled with an understanding far beyond her years. Emily squeezed her daughter's hand, as if trying to shield her from the pain of the past. Keanu's voice was barely above a whisper. And you? What did you do after that? Emily straightened her shoulders, as if the strength in her posture was something she had learned to rehearse. I kept going. Because I didn't have a choice. A loud car horn from Pump 2 interrupted their conversation. Emily instinctively straightened up, her exhaustion masked by duty. Excuse me, sir. Duty calls. Keanu remained still, watching her walk away. He noticed a slight limp in her right foot, the weight of her pregnancy evident in every movement. His gaze shifted back to Sophia, who had returned to her chair. The little girl still held her red pencil, but her eyes stayed on her mother, filled with a concern no child should have to bear. Keanu crouched beside her, speaking softly. Your mom works a lot. Sophia nodded, gripping her pencil tighter. She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep. Keanu felt a pang in his chest. Why? Sophia hesitated before answering. Because she's tired, she said, pressing her pencil harder into the page. And because, like Mama said, Papa left when he found out about the baby. He said he didn't want another mouth to feed. Keanu said nothing, but her words echoed in his mind. He looked over at Emily, who was back at work, and knew he had to do something. This woman had spent her life fighting for her daughter's future. Sophia, despite everything, still carried a spark of hope in her eyes. That hope couldn't be ignored. Keanu stood up, his mind racing. He didn't have all the answers yet. But one thing was certain, what he was about to do would change everything. And it would leave everyone speechless. The drizzle turned colder, the air heavier. Emily adjusted her jacket, a shiver running through her already exhausted body. Sophia, beside her, kept scribbling another drawing, but she frequently glanced up at her mother, as if sensing the invisible weight she carried. Keanu stood nearby, watching the quiet interaction between mother and daughter. The contrast was stark, Sophia's innocent brightness and Emily's overwhelming exhaustion. He couldn't look away. Finally, he spoke. I'd like to ask you something. Emily turned, slightly surprised but attentive. If you had one chance. If you could do something different, just once, what would it be? Emily hesitated. The question seemed simple, yet the weight of its answer pressed heavily on her shoulders. She glanced down at the wet pavement, her thoughts tangled in years of sacrifice. I don't know, she admitted after a pause. I don't think I can afford to think like that anymore. There's no room for what-ifs when you have bills to pay and children to raise. Keanu nodded, sensing the walls she had built around her dreams. I imagine you've had to give up a lot because of that. Emily shook her head slightly. Giving up? That's not the right word. It's more like. She trailed off, searching for the right words. Life just doesn't allow certain things. You can't dream when you're barely making rent. Beside her, Sophia looked up from her drawing. But you still cook, Mama. And you make the best lasagna in the world. Emily let out a soft chuckle, a laugh tinged with sadness. Making lasagna at home and running a restaurant are two very different things, sweetheart. Keanu turned his attention back to Emily. But you've wanted a restaurant, haven't you? Silence hung between them before Emily finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, when I was younger. Before all of this. Before Marco. Keanu caught the weight in her voice. Your husband? Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. When we got married, we dreamed of opening a restaurant together. She exhaled softly, as if the memory itself carried a burden. He used to say I had a gift, that my love for food was something special. But after Sophia was born, things changed. It got harder. And when I found out I was pregnant again, She hesitated, then swallowed hard. He left. Sophia instinctively squeezed her mother's hand, offering silent comfort. Emily's voice wavered, but she forced herself to continue. He said he couldn't handle another burden. That he didn't want another responsibility. And then, he just walked away. Keanu felt a knot tighten in his chest. He looked at Sophia, now quietly sketching, then at Emily, who tried to maintain a composed posture despite the weight she carried. He straightened up, his expression serious. Maybe you feel like you don't have any choices right now. But, what if you had help? What if there was a way to change that? Emily frowned, clearly skeptical. I appreciate the thought, but I don't need charity. I'm fine. Keanu's voice was firm yet gentle. I'm not talking about charity. I'm talking about an opportunity. Something that could help you dream again. Emily shook her head, struggling to grasp his words. Why do you care? I'm nobody important. Keanu held her gaze. Because everyone deserves the chance to dream. And because you deserve more than just surviving. His voice grew resolute. I'll be back tomorrow. Emily stared at him, unsure how to respond. Why? Keanu simply smiled. Because I think you deserve more than this. He gestured subtly toward the gas station and Sophia's notebook before turning toward his motorcycle. See you tomorrow. Emily stood frozen, speechless, as he rode away. She didn't know what to make of his promise. But what he would bring the next day was something she could never have imagined. The next morning, Emily finished her shift at the gas station, organizing her things behind the counter. She barely had time to process her exhaustion when she heard it, the familiar low rumble of a motorcycle engine. She turned, and there he was. Sophia, sitting beside her, immediately perked up, her eyes filled with curiosity. Keanu pulled up at the same pump as the night before, stepping off his bike with an easy, knowing smile. In his hands, he carried 2 large paper bags. He approached them with quiet confidence, like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Good morning. Emily eyed him warily. You actually came back. Keanu simply shrugged. I said I would. He placed the bags on the counter and turned to Sophia with a warm smile. Good morning, Sophia. Good morning, she chirped, her attention already fixated on the bags. Before Emily could say anything, Keanu gently opened one of them. Inside were basic groceries, a few new clothes for Sophia, and sitting on top, a pristine box of brand new colored pencils. Sophia gasped, her small hands flying to her mouth. Pencils, she squealed, hugging the box like a treasure. Thank you, mister. Emily watched her daughter's joy, her gaze lingering on the items in the bag. She opened her mouth to speak, but Keanu beat her to it. I know what you're thinking, he said softly. But this isn't charity. It's just a little push to help you breathe easier. Emily shook her head, her emotions catching in her throat. I don't know if I can accept this. Keanu didn't hesitate. He placed an envelope on the counter. This is for rent. Just for this month. And there's one more thing. He handed her a slightly crumpled flyer. Emily took it cautiously, her eyes scanning the words. Culinary course for single mothers. She blinked, confused. What is this? It's a free cooking course, Keanu explained. It covers professional techniques and even helps with the business side of things, in case you ever want to turn this into something bigger. Emily looked from the flyer to Keanu, struggling to process what was happening. Why are you doing this? You don't even know us. Keanu offered a small smile. And what he said next changed everything, a simple act of kindness that changed everything. Keanu's expression was serious yet kind as he met Emily's hesitant gaze. Because you deserve it, he said firmly. And because sometimes one act of kindness can change everything. Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself against the overwhelming emotions bubbling inside her. I don't know what to say. Keanu shook his head. You don't have to say anything right now. Just think about it. And know that someone believes in you. Sophia, still clutching her treasured colored pencils, looked at the flyer in her mother's hand. Mama, will you learn new recipes? Like the ones Grandma used to make? Emily glanced between her daughter and the flyer, something shifting within her. A small space for hope, however faint, began to take root. She exhaled, her fingers tightening around the paper as she whispered, maybe it's time to try. Little did she know, what Keanu had planned next would be even more transformative. Months later. A dream reborn. Time passed, and with it, everything changed. The culinary course Emily joined did more than refine her cooking skills, it opened doors she never imagined possible. With each class, she rediscovered her passion for food and, more importantly, its power to bring people together. But while Emily was learning, Keanu was working quietly behind the scenes. He reached out to contacts, found support, and secured the perfect little space in the neighborhood. A place that, soon, would mean everything. One morning, Emily and Sophia arrived at an unfamiliar location. Uncertain, she stepped forward, her heart pounding. Keanu stood by the entrance, his calm smile waiting for them. What is this? Emily asked, her eyes scanning the storefront. Keanu simply stepped aside, revealing the sign above the door. The elegant lettering read, La Cuisine de Nana. Emily froze. Her hand flew to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. Sophia, clinging to her mother's arm, gasped with pure joy. It's your restaurant, Mama, she exclaimed, tugging at her hand. It's really yours. Emily turned to Keanu, disbelief etched in every line of her face. You did this? Why? Keanu smiled, but his tone was steady, resolute. Because you deserve it. Because your story and your talent are special. And the world needs to see them. No one should have to give up on their dreams. Together, they stepped inside. The space was simple yet beautiful, exactly what Emily needed to begin. A functional kitchen, neatly arranged tables, thoughtful little details that reminded her of her grandmother's small restaurant in Italy. In the corner, a small table was set up for children to draw, equipped with the very same colored pencils Keanu had gifted Sophia months ago. Emily ran her fingers across the countertops, still struggling to believe it was real. She turned to Keanu, her voice unsteady. I don't know how to thank you for this. Keanu's response was simple. You don't have to thank me. Just do what you do best, cook, bring people together. And when the time comes, pass this kindness forward. The grand opening. Days later, La Cucina di Nana opened its doors to the community. The aroma of freshly prepared meals filled the air, wrapping the small restaurant in a warmth that felt like home. Customers filled the seats, their conversations the melody of laughter, connection, and appreciation for the food that carried history in every bite. Emily crafted each dish with love, each one telling a story. Her grandmother's cherished recipes now had a new life, infused with her own creativity, served to people who quickly became family. At a small corner table, Sophia proudly handed out menus she had designed herself. She moved between guests, chatting about the restaurant, telling them how it was inspired by her grandmother's kitchen back in Italy. And in a quiet corner, Keanu sat at his usual table, watching it all unfold. Emily, wiping her hands on her apron, approached with a plate of lasagna, one made just the way her grandmother used to make it. She set it in front of him, then sat down, exhaling softly. "I never imagined I'd be here," she admitted, emotion thick in her voice. Keanu glanced around, the glow of the restaurant reflecting in his eyes. "But you deserve to be." He took a bite, then looked at her with a small smile. "What you've created here, it's something everyone needs to experience." As Emily looked around the bustling restaurant, the warmth of the kitchen, the laughter of families, Sophia's joy, she realized something. Her dream had come back to life. But it wasn't just her life that had changed. The ripple effect of one act of kindness had extended far beyond her, reaching into a community that now had a place to gather, to connect, to share meals and memories. And as the night went on, Emily knew this was only the beginning, the best spot in the house. Keanu leaned back in his chair, a quiet smile settling on his face as he observed the life unfolding around him. The soft golden glow of the restaurant's pendant lights bathed the room in warmth. The gentle hum of conversation, the occasional bursts of laughter, the rhythmic clinking of silverware against porcelain, all of it painted a picture of something special, something deeply human. He exhaled slowly, his gaze sweeping across the room with quiet appreciation. "The best spot in the house," he murmured, his voice barely rising above the cozy ambience. "I can see everything from here." Across from him, Emily took a seat, following his line of sight. She saw what he saw, tables filled with people sharing meals, the soft flicker of candlelight reflecting in their smiles. Strangers connecting over food, old friends reuniting over stories, families coming together over steaming dishes carefully crafted with love. A sight she once thought she would never see. She inhaled deeply, as if trying to absorb the moment, to imprint it onto her soul. "I never could have imagined this," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. She turned back to Keanu, her expression earnest. "Not a day goes by that I don't thank you for what you've done for me and Sophia. You changed everything." Keanu tilted his head slightly, the soft glow of the overhead lights catching in his dark eyes. He shook his head gently. "No," he corrected, his tone calm yet resolute. "You changed everything. I just gave you a little push." Emily smiled, but there was something deeper behind it, an unspoken acknowledgement of the journey that had led her here. The sacrifices, the struggles, the nights spent wondering if she was doing enough. And yet, here she was. Here they were. Her smile faded slightly as she straightened in her chair. "I'll never forget what you've done for us," she said, her voice unwavering. "And I'll make sure to pay it forward." Keanu nodded, a glimmer of quiet pride in his eyes. "That's all I could ever ask," he said. "Kindness is a cycle. Now, you have the chance to be that change for someone else." At that moment, a small figure appeared beside the table. "Mama! Look what I drew!" Sophia's eyes sparkled as she clutched her sketchbook tightly, her excitement barely contained. Emily took the book from her tiny hands and flipped it open. She let out a soft chuckle, then a breath caught somewhere between nostalgia and awe. It was a beautifully detailed drawing of the restaurant, tables filled with happy customers, steaming plates of food filling the space with warmth. And above it all, in bold, confident letters, a sign stretched across the building. La Cucina di Nana. Emily's chest tightened as she pulled Sophia into a hug, pressing a gentle kiss to her daughter's hair. "It's perfect," she whispered. Keanu stood, placing a few folded bills on the table with casual ease. Emily looked up. "I think it's time for me to go," he said, his tone soft yet certain. Her brows furrowed slightly. "Why?" "You're part of this." He gave her a knowing smile, one filled with quiet understanding. "I always will be," he assured her. "But this place is yours now. It's time for you to keep writing this story." He turned to Sophia, ruffling her hair affectionately. "Keep drawing, kiddo. Never stop." Sophia grinned, clutching her sketchbook as if it held all the magic in the world. Emily watched as Keanu walked toward the door, his footsteps unhurried, his presence still lingering even as he prepared to leave. And as she sat there, watching the man who had changed the course of her life step away, she realized something. Her life hadn't just changed. It had transformed. And now, she was ready to be that transformation for someone else. The power of dreams and kindness. The message in this story is simple, yet profoundly powerful. Never stop dreaming. Dreams are the quiet flames that keep hope alive within us, even in the hardest moments. They give us purpose, direction, and something to fight for. Kindness is the invisible thread that connects us all. A quiet force that transforms lives, reminding us that no one is ever truly alone. Together, dreams and kindness have the power to change the world. Not through grand, sweeping gestures, but one life at a time, one act at a time. So believe in them. Nurture them. And most importantly, pass them on. Because that's how we build a more beautiful future. For all of us. If this story touched your heart, click the screen to continue the journey. Explore more stories of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary impact of simple kindness.